spouses, companions, friends. Grow close and encircle grieving families with your loving care. We remember the bright days and the dark days following, where we saw in those days glimpses of the best of humanity and the worst. We remember these things and seek in the mystery of life both your justice and mercy. God of all nations, watch over every country of the earth, comfort them in their distress, and draw us together in your one kingdom that cannot be shaken. God of compassion, watch the ways of humanity and weave out of terrible happenings wonders of goodness and grace. Surround those who have been shaken by tragedy with a sense of your present love and hold them in faith. Though they are lost in grief, may they find you and be comforted. Amen. On behalf of Dr. Cooper and Springfield College, I want to welcome you here today for our 20th anniversary commemoration of the tragedies of September 11th. This was not an easy observance to put together. I've shared with some friends and colleagues that I've struggled finding the right words for this time. Because at 20 years, it's a remembrance that comes at a very strange time. There are those in the room who were present in person. There were those who viewed it from a distance at the time, and where we were in our lives. We were in very different places, and perhaps each in different ways. And I was reflecting this past week that we welcomed new students. Most of these new students were born well after the events of September 11th. They hold this strange sort of historical position, something that happened way back then, like Pearl Harbor, Vietnam. So I've struggled because there are so many different experiences this day based on how old you are, where you're from, your nationality, your faith, differences in experience and generations. No one experience captures it all. But as on that day of tragedy, where the world faced a difficult situation, it was by coming together of many different voices, many different perspectives that we have been able to move forward. I've been blessed by those who will share here today in their words, their art, and their music. Alone we stand bereft for the tragedy of that day, and we still try to make sense of it. Hopefully together we can weave back some fabric of common shared experience. So as now for our first speaker, we'll introduce Professor Robert Hopkins. Professor Harris.
Good morning, and a beautiful morning this is, as it was 20 years ago on this very day, and about this very time. I was home watching the television that morning when the planes hit the towers, and my boss called me and said, it doesn't look like an accident, but an thing. What she's referring to is not only was I in charge of the paramedic program here and a professor teaching our great students, but I'm also, as you can tell by the uniform, it's not Springfield College uniform. By virtue of my being a paramedic, and I was the deputy commander of the University of Massachusetts Medical Center Disaster Medical Assistance Team. And my first year as the deputy commander, I got literally a baptism by fire. And packed up my things, told my boss to have somebody cover my paramedic class, and off to Worcester to a bus. In the middle of the night, we traveled with 50 people, doctors, nurses, paramedics, technicians, to go down to ground zero to see what we could do. We were federalized and got out the door within 12 hours. I'm not going to recollect the events of that day that you've seen on television. I'd rather make it a personal as to what my thoughts and feelings were, because there were so many programs on all week we got a little overloaded on it. Not that we should ever forget. anyone who was there, excuse me, could not possibly forget what we saw, what we felt, what we saw. We arrived at Stewart Air Force Base, north of New York City, where we stationed ourselves waiting for a mission. Because our normal mission was to set up medical units to treat sick, wounded people. Our normal mission was to set up emergency hospitals along the Gulf Coast after hurricanes. Hurricane Katrina was one of the Hurricane Andrews, Hurricane Hugo, where there's devastation. You set up medical treatments, you treat the wounded and sick, and we work with the military, the DOD, as we're federalized, to evacuate people to mainland hospitals and further care. The problem was that that was our normal mission, was hurricanes and taking care of people. Well, when we got to Stewart Air Force Base, we were in a big hangar. We slept the night or two in the C-5A hangar. You got your choice of a mattress or a cot. That's what we got. And we were just as scared as everyone else in the country. And everyone, military, clergy, we were just all stunned by what happened to our country. So the advance team went down to the pit, to the hole, where they waited to decide whether to send us home, since there was no one alive to treat, or to find another mission. Well, fortunately, they found a very good mission for us, which was to set up medical treatment tents with doctors, nurses, paramedics, technicians, communication setup. My job was to set up 5 tents around the hole, the pit down there. And my first recollection going in there was it was like a big cavern. The smoke was still billowing. The smells were unbelievable. And that's one thing you take away from you. Imprinted in your brain. You just never lose that. And it was terrifying how afraid everybody was because we didn't know what was going to happen next. I'll say, as they say in the literature, the best of times, the worst of times. And my boss said, I hated 9/11, but I loved 9/12. The next day, you know, I've never such a unity before or since in this country. We held a Catholic Mass in the hangar, and we had Arabs, Jews, Christians, atheists, all praying together, because as the state famous, somebody else with me, there are no atheists in foxholes. We were fighting for our country, we were fighting for ourselves. And I salute the people I was with, all those that came with me, and there were 5 teams of about 50 people each that ended up doing that mission and treating the firefighters, the iron workers. There were serious injuries taking place. There was no power. And again, we set up a tent next to a church. It was Vesey Street, if I'm recalling correctly. And being there, we took different shifts, day, night, overnight. The surreal thing was the whole ground zero. If anyone had ever been there, you know what I'm talking about. It was like, if you ever worked with cement, you know, putting a cement post in your backyard for the fence, it was just like that sticky, gray, smelly, nasty dust everywhere. It was like walking in the room. Everything was black and white. It was like being a black and white movie. And the other thing that was amazing was at night, being there's no power, they had the big white quartz lights lighting up the area. And in the trees next to one of my treatment areas, next to the church, were the burned trees in the courtyard of that church, where there were blackened by the fires. And in the trees were hanging shards of paper and cloth. They were weaving in the breeze looking very ghost-like. And you could not help but feel the spirituality of the lost souls that were just a few 100 yards away from us. It was very moving, spiritual, and it's something you just never get over. I say that, yet we do persevere, all of us, in emergency services, military, police, fire, EMS. We're no braver than anybody else, but we just put it aside to try to serve our people, to serve the mission. And again, the thing that I came away with was, I'll tell you one interesting anecdote, and that was, I was getting on the bus to get down to Ground Zero, and a couple of things were interesting about that. They put us up in the Westin, a 5-star hotel. I mean, none of us could ever afford that, a good thing, but the FEMA people all moved in and we took over. And I was waiting for the rest of the crew to get in the bus. So I'm in my uniform and my backpack. I go to a bodega to get a bottle of water to take with me because there's no services at Ground Zero. So I'm buying my soda or whatever. And this little old lady about the high, little Jewish lady, comes up to me and says, "Excuse me, Sonny, are you here for the World Trade Center?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "Can I give you a hug?" Oh, good fine. Driving down and back along West Street, of course, it's all cordoned off, and our bus is escorted by the police every day in and out. There were hundreds of people cheering, like a football team. And, you know, was it tough? No, we went to help them, and they just helped us deal with it more than we could ever imagine. And the camaraderie we came away with, and the mission, commitment to continue to serve our country, to serve our neighbors, and to serve the medical community was awesome. These people are my good friends to this day. We share a mission, and I hope we never have to again. Right now, our team, I'm no longer the team that retired because of my invitation. We had nothing to do with World Trade Center, and we had many missions of hurricanes, Puerto Rico, Haiti, the earthquake, humanitarian missions doing the same thing, setting out and treating people, evacuating them, and like that, with the federal system. And it is like a big firefighter where you go along being a college professor and say, "Hey, we need you to go. Okay, I gotta go." Just like the military folks are under USERA where they have to let us go, or it's like funding, so they say, "Okay, go, please." And Springfield College is very supportive. It's part of our mission to take care of people, part of our mission to serve humanity, spirit, mind, and body. And as I close, I just want you to remember one of my students, Ryan McCormick, who was a graduate, a paramedic, working at Barnabas Medical Center in New Jersey, who responded to the World Trade Center before the towers fell, actually, as an immediate first responder, who succumbed to 9/11 World Trade Center cancer at the age of 27. Because he went in, was saving people, and was exposed, and gave his life, and he's a Springfield College graduate. We should honor him. Thank you.
On 9/11/2001, at 8:46 in the morning, I was sitting in my third grade class in the classroom with my English teacher and all of my classmates. When suddenly the principal comes into the room and calls out our teacher to the hallway for about a minute or so. When my teacher, Davies, comes into the classroom, she turns on the TV and puts it on the local news, which would never happen today in school. But from there, all I really remember is watching the TV and watching two very tall buildings smoke, and fire departments and police officers driving down the highway towards the smoke. About 20 minutes later, I was called to the principal's office, and I was told that my stepfather was there to pick me up and take me home. Because at the time, my mom was working about 3 blocks away from the Pentagon and notified them that there was no way to get out of the city. There was so much traffic and so much chaos going on. Luckily, she was able to make it to my grandparents' house, who lived right outside of Georgetown. I wouldn't be able to see my mother for another 48 hours. Driving home, my stepdad tried to explain to me what was going on and that we were heading home to pack our things to head to Mount Weather. For anybody who doesn't understand or know what Mount Weather is, it is a government facility where high-profile individuals go in times of crisis. It was the closest area that we thought that would be safe. As a 9-year-old, it's very hard to understand the magnitude of what's going on. To a 9-year-old, it's just something's happening. I knew it wasn't right. I knew it was bad, but other than that, I didn't really know. And my first question was, where's my mom at? Where is she? That was really the only thing that I could comprehend at the time, that my mom was somewhere not safe and she wasn't here with me. So my stepfather decided to be open and start explaining what was going on, so I could try to better grasp the situation. And of course, there was no way for me to really understand what was happening, and it kind of leads me to my next point. Fast forward to a couple years later, I graduated from high school with some scholarships and opportunities to play football at some of the universities, but ultimately I decided to enlist in the Army as an infantryman. I deployed very quickly after graduating basic training, about 3 months. And it wasn't really until this time where I really understood the magnitude of what happened that day 20 years ago. Really understood the sacrifices that had been made up until that point, from the police officers, the firefighters, the EMS personnel, the Good Samaritans, the normal people just living their lives that day. And the past 20 years have been so important as a country, and as a military member, it's hard to measure words. Now that the conflict in Afghanistan is over, I've been asking myself what have the past 20 years meant. What did my service mean? And a lot of other veterans are asking themselves the same thing. When it was first announced that the conflict is over and we were blowing out, I didn't really know what to feel. I felt angry, sad, frustrated, happy, relieved, all at the same time. There are a lot of veterans who don't know how to process what is happening, and what is happening now, and what may happen in the future. To my fellow veterans, your service was not for nothing. We did everything in our power to help the people of Afghanistan fight back against their oppressor, to defend our family, our way of life here in America. After events of 9/11, the only way the past 20 years could ever be meaningless is if we forget the events and stop remembering those who gave the ultimate sacrifice 20 years ago and leading up until now. To everybody here today, thank you for remembering with us.
I share with you a reflection of the Springfield College alumnus. The Reverend Margaret Lowe Weiss graduated from Springfield College in 2002. and I had the pleasure of getting to know Margaret. Actually, 2006 was the year I began here at the college, and so I didn't know Margaret as a student, but over the years, because of my line of work, and she was interested in ministry, we developed sort of a relationship and advisor over the years, and she had shared this reflection, and I asked if I could share it here. So, I haven't written or said much about the situation with Afghanistan in recent weeks. The military involvement we've had in the region, which began when I was in high school and has continued for the entirety of my adulthood, is such a complicated issue. September 11th happened when I was a senior in high school. Many of my classmates went on to serve in the military, and many of them died. And now, as a military spouse of over 10 years, whose wife served in Afghanistan, I have not said much about what our withdrawal from that region has meant for me and my family. Perhaps this is because as a military spouse, I have come to learn that what I can fully understand about international affairs fits in a grain of sand. Perhaps it is because I know that things are always more messy, chaotic, and complex than we might think they are. Perhaps it's because of the immense heartbreak. The heartbreak of so much danger, so much worry, so much loss. I know that those who served in Afghanistan and their families are feeling all of the emotions these days, an onslaught of highs and lows and everything in between. I know I am. I have so much gratitude for all the people who served on the teams that carried out what would become the largest scale evacuation of civilians and allies in U.S. history. And I know, as you do, and as they do, that so many have been left behind. 20 years in a place that is still struggling for peace and certainty, and we live in a country that is struggling with those things too. Some days the suffering is overwhelming. And there are people waking up every day, working tirelessly to feed, house, and clothe people who come here to the U.S. There are people who are planning and organizing and figuring out the logistics to bring about healing and perhaps even comfort for these people and their families. There are people who are doing the good work of bringing a little more humanity into the world. I know these people exist because I'm married to them. A woman who enlisted in the Air Force after September 11th and has served for nearly half her life with passion for the work she does. She's now deployed she's presently deployed at McGuire Air Force Base, helping nearly 11,000 Afghan nationals find their footing in American soil. I'm so grateful for her in this world and in my life. Perhaps through these acts of love and service, we can bring some more healing to this beautiful and broken world.
terrible tragedy. And in that I recall a beautiful incident that was told me. I was in India at that time, I was in India at that time. But this incident happened at our mosque in the Springfield. One of our elders of the Bible said to me, 2001, 9/11 was a Tuesday. Friday, which is our congregational prayer day. He said, I came to the mosque and to my great surprise, I saw 4 priests and 4 or 5 doctors from his state and the hospital. All of them doctors. They were in the hospital. They were in the mosque. So Dr. Wanda said, I greeted them and I said, why are you here? They said, you don't know what may happen. So we are here to stand for you and to protect you. You go in and you do your stuff, you do your prayers, and we are going to stand outside here to take care of anything if it happens. Now, I want to say nowhere else but in America. But I'm sure I'll be challenged because there are good people everywhere. But I can certainly say that there are not many places in the world where something like that can happen. We didn't ask them. We didn't tell them. We had no idea they would come. These were ordinary Americans who had been as shocked as all of us with what happened a few days before that, and took it upon themselves to come and stand in solidarity and protection for the Muslims. Because they knew that the worst thing about stereotyping of any kind is that everybody gets tarred with the same brush. That's what happened. These people realized that. They said, no, we're not going to let that happen. Whoever did, the individuals, they do not represent a large group. And that to me is the spirit of this nation. I want to recite for you some Quran. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الله نور السماوات والأرض مثل نوره كمشكاة فيها مصباح المصباح في زجاجة الزجاجة كأنها كوكب دري يوقد من شجرة مباركة زيتونة لا شرقية ولا غربية يكاد زيتها يوضع ولو لا تمسسه نار نور على نور يهدي الله لنوره من يشاء ويضرب الله الأمثال للناس والله بكل شيء عليم. The meaning of that, Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. The parable of His light is as if there were a niche and within it a lamp. The lamp is in glass. The glass, as it were, a brilliant star, lit from a blessed tree, an olive, neither of the east nor of the west, whose oil would almost glow forth of itself, though no fire touched it. Light upon light. Allah guides to His light whom He wills, and and Allah sets forth parables for mankind, and Allah is all-knower of everything. The idea of America has always been the struggle to live up to the values on which this country was created. And so I pray for the courage to struggle for truth against falsehood, for human dignity against humiliation, for compassion against cruelty, for justice against oppression. I pray for the courage to build a nation where the color of your dreams counts for more than the color of your hair. I pray for the courage to share the bounties we are blessed with and to struggle in the pursuit of knowledge against ignorance. I pray for the courage to change this world, to eliminate war, to ensure that nobody goes to bed on an empty belly without knowing what the morrow holds. I pray for the courage to save the earth, our earth, the only home we have, from our greed, leveraged and monetized by a few for their own benefit, leading to global poverty, catastrophic climate change, and mass extinction of species. I pray for the courage to speak and act, to ensure that we take the steps to leave a legacy of honor for generations yet unborn. I pray, I speak, I act, and I invite you to do the same. Or if not now, then when? If not you, then who? O Allah, we ask for your mercy, your grace, your compassion, your forgiveness, and your protection from all evil, for all of us here, for this country,